Hello, today's lesson on Vietnam is we're going to take a look at towards the end of the Vietnam War. The support in America is not starting to fade a little bit after the Tet Offensive. Americans are starting wondering, can we win this war? Today we want to look at the My Massacre, the invasion of Cambodia, and how the anti-war movement in America grows with this, leading to a tragedy called Kent State. So Richard Nixon is elected in 1968, 69, and as president, he wants to get America out of this war. He starts to realize we can't win it. But how do you leave a war? It's not easy. You don't just leave. If you see the picture there, that's Henry Kissinger. That's his aide. And Kissinger and Nixon try to figure out ways that we can get America's involvement down or out. They come up with something called Vietnamization. That's where we take more American troops out of the country and we start letting the Vietnamese fight more and more, let them take over more. So it's a shifting from American troops fighting the war to Vietnamese troops fighting the war. It's called Vietnamization. At the same time, we're going to start negotiating, and eventually we get to the Paris peace talks, which we and the communists are trying to negotiate a way of ending the war. We want to try to get as much as we can out of this with a dignity and honor of leaving, but we really don't hold any cards because the Vietnamese know we don't want to stay forever. So there's no reason for them to really give in. And so the negotiations are going to drag out. And we're going to do a lot of stuff to show we're serious. If you look at the picture here, that's a B-52 dropping a lot of bombs. That's kind of a interesting say, hey, we want peace, let's drop some bombs. But you got to get people's attention. Unfortunately, at about this time, the fallout of something that happens in Vietnam hits, and it's really going to cloud America's view on the war. The My Lai Massacre. My Lai is a little village in South Vietnam. And on March 16, 1968, towards the end of the Tet Offensive, American soldiers are involved in something which we generously call a massacre. It's more like a tragedy. It's just a horror of war. To step back, Charlie Company was of the Marical Division, had been going out every day, and near this village of My Lai and these other villages, an area called Pinkville, they called it Pinkville on the map, they had been taking on a lot of casualties from booby traps, from landmines. They never even saw the enemy. Instead, they were losing men all the time from these landmines. Here's a quote from one of the guys at Charlie Company. When you lose 21 men in an hour's time in a minefield, you tend to want something back for it. We actually wanted heavy contact out there. We were hoping for it. That's a guy in Charlie Company. So what happens is they decide Charlie Company is sent back in. This time, they're sent back in to clear the village in the area. A free fire zone means basically anybody that's left is the enemy. Well, My Lai was not declared a free fire zone, but it's pretty darn close to it. Because when Charlie Company goes back in, they're told, take care of it. Their leader, William Calley, had been told by his officers that everybody there is bad, everybody there is connected to the enemy, the Viet Cong, so American soldiers need to take care of this problem once for all. And the American soldiers, I mean, when they go into this village, they're ordered by Calley to shoot civilians. Now, not every soldier does. Some soldiers refuse orders. Other soldiers, very sadly, didn't. Here's a quote from one of the guys who was in it. When you're in an infantry company in an isolated environment like rural Vietnam, the rules of that company are foremost. The laws back home don't make any difference. What people think of you back home don't matter. What matters is how the people around you are going to see you. Killing a bunch of civilians in this way, babies, women, old men, children, people who are unarmed, helpless, was wrong. Every American would know that. Yet this company didn't see it that way. This company was all that mattered. It was the whole world. What they thought was right was right. What they thought was wrong was wrong. The definition for things turned around. Courage was stupidity, and cruelty and brutality were seen sometimes as heroic. That's what it turned into. And another quote, you really do lose your sense, not of right or wrong, but your degree of wrong changes. A set of rules, different rules, emerge, and I don't think that any of us quite knew what those rules were. That's one of the soldiers in Charlie Company. And they're ordered to start searching and destroying the village. If you look at the pictures here, there was a photographer along, and he was taking official pictures, but he also had his own camera, was taking unofficial. If you look at the woman in red and the women and children there that are terrified, they've just been assaulted by American troops. He takes the picture, he walks away, then he hears gunfire, and he turns back, and that whole group of civilians is dead. Other places in My Lai, men are burning the huts. Civilians are running and screaming. It's an unbelievable atmosphere of carnage and fear and everything. And Cali orders his men to go ahead and machine gun down civilians. If you look at the middle picture on the road there, those are Vietnamese civilians that were gunned down, women and children and men. And what happens is it just gets out of control. Some of the best numbers I've seen look like 500 civilians are going to be killed in this area. Now, not everybody took part in this. One of the people that noticed this and saw what was happening was Hugh Thompson. He was an Army helicopter pilot, and he saw shooting, and he couldn't believe it. And when he saw a bunch of civilians leaving the village and were being pursued by American soldiers, he ordered his helicopter. He landed his helicopter and ordered his gunner, his door gunner, to cover the American soldiers so they wouldn't come closer. And he tried to rescue some of the civilians. But there was sadly far too a little of this during the day, and by the end of the day, American soldiers in heat of battle had opened up the worst of the war, and 500 civilians are going to be dead. Now, you can't cover that up. The people that are taken involved with it, they are all going to carry that with them. They're going to carry it inside of them. Part of the assignment that you're going to be doing is reading some quotes from people involved, and this is one of the quotes. One of the men from that little platoon went out again. They went out again, and he hit a landmine. While the medics were taking care of him, he looked up at Cali, and this is what he said. This is days after the massacre. This is God's punishment, Cali, but you'll get yours. God will punish you, Cali. That soldier knew that what he had done was wrong, and he knew that he couldn't forget it. Another soldier said this, how can I forgive? I can't forgive myself for things, even though I knew it was something I was told to do. How do you go ahead with your life when this is holding you back? I can't put my mind to anything. Yes, I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. I'm guilty. But I did it, you know. What else can I tell you? It happened. This is my life. This is my past. This is my present. This is my future. And I keep it. The guy holds an album of pictures to remind me, this is my life. This is everything. This is what made me this way. And that soldier, Vernaldo Simpson, would go ahead later on and commit suicide because he couldn't take carrying those ghosts with him. Well, the army tries to cover this up and not say anything, but it gets out. And eventually, when it hits the press, the public pulls on this, and it shocks America. There's going to be hearings and a trial. In the end, somebody has to be a scapegoat, and that's going to be Cali. Cali will be convicted and sentenced, a long sentence, but they would commute his sentence, and then later on, he would be pardoned. I think everybody in the American army just wanted this thing to go away. But I mean, My Lai shows that in war, bad things happen. And when things happen, they get so out of control in war, but the impacts are long-term. Well, that's 1969 when 68 when the massacre happened, 69 when it comes out, 70 it's still in the news. And that, unfortunately, is why so many American soldiers coming back are going to be tainted with it. A friend of mine who was a Marine that came back was called a baby killer after this. And my friend is a hero. He served his country bravery, but you know what? It was all clouded. And if you watch the movie Forrest Gump, and there's a scene in there when he meets the Black Panthers, and they talk about who's the baby killer. Well, because of My Lai, a lot of soldiers are going to be portrayed that way. Not that they deserve to be, but that's how perception changes. So that's going to change how America looks at the war and supports the war. The invasion of Cambodia is another thing. 1970, we expand the war to a neighboring country. If you look at the picture here, the North Vietnamese have brought supplies down to the Viet Cong and the NVA in South Vietnam through something called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It's kind of like cheating. You take your troops and supplies and you move them in a country that's neutral with this war, and then you bring them into South Vietnam. Well, we knew they were doing it, and we dropped bombs and stuff on the trail, and they did stuff. But by 1970, we realized they've got bases in Cambodia, and we just can't allow that to happen. So Nixon decides to go ahead and use the U.S. Army and the Army Republic of Vietnam, the ARVN, to go into Cambodia and try to clear out these bases. It wasn't exactly secret, but it was supposed to not be a big published thing. A guy I used to teach with at Burke used to tell me about it. He was on the invasion, and Jeff said that it was no secret. They're all on these these armored vehicles heading into Cambodia, and there was no secret about it. You can't keep secret. Thousands of guys moving in, blowing stuff up and burning stuff. It really was not a good secret. But when the public in America finds that instead of fighting Vietnam and winding the war down, we've now expanded it to Vietnam, oh my God, the public reaction was huge. It was outrageous. A side effect of this is we do drag the war into Cambodia, and the government of Cambodia will fall. And after the Vietnam War is all over, Cambodia is going to have their own headache when the communists in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, are going to take over the country, and they're going to massacre a ton of people in Cambodia. But in America, when we find out that the war is now bigger, it's gone just from Vietnam now to Cambodia, and that you add all the stuff with My Lai on there, people are not going to be happy. Protests in every American campus across the country seem to spring out. Now, here in Bennington, we didn't have any hippies in Bennington, God forbid. But long-haired people on campus start saying, hey, I don't want to go to that war. They don't support that war. And there's going to be a big anti-war movement for people burning draft cards and stuff. And on a lot of colleges, there's going to be a problem. One of them is in Kent State, Ohio. And in Kent State, a lot of these protesters start getting excited about the war. And if you look at the picture, though, it's a simple thing. Look at the National Guard guys with their guns and the guy putting the flowers in the end of the gun. It's the hippie movement, kids. Make love, not war. And however, it's going to be because there was a lot of people, like my dad, God love him, Korean era vet and all, supported the country. You got to support the troops. And there's a conflict in America, supporting the war, anti-war. And on Kent State, these protests boil over. They're going to set fire to the ROTC building. That's the building where people go into college and want to be officers or through. And the governor of Ohio decides that's not going to happen. He calls out the National Guard. And the National Guard is called out to Kent State campus to restore order. Well, it doesn't go well. On a hillside, there's people yelling, they're screaming, there's all sorts of things happen. A gunshot rings out. Some of the guard guys said that they were ordered to fire. Others of them just heard the sound and thought there was. Or in the end, whatever the reason, the National Guard troops on the hilltop open fire. They shoot. 4 students are killed and 9 are wounded. Look at the picture here. This picture shocks America. If you see the girl on her knees, looks like she with her hands out. She's saying, "Why? Why?" Well, we know now there's other things about the girl, about her own history and stuff like that. But her face as she looks over one of these protesters killed on the ground shocks America. Crosby, Stills, and Nash in their famous song, Ohio, 4 Dead in Ohio, are talking about this. You had protest songs on Friday in class. Well, this is a song, 4 Dead in Ohio. And it shocks America. I taught with the girl who when I first started teaching back in '89 at Lewis and Clark, who went to Kent State that day. She was not on the fields that day, but she said what happened is afterwards they closed the dorms, they kicked everybody off college, they closed everything down, shut it down, just like that. And other protests are going to spring out in other places like Jackson State in Mississippi and other places. And then, if that's not enough, 1971, the Pentagon Papers get released. This is where the Pentagon takes a look back at Vietnam, tries to figure out what the heck happened. And these show that the government maybe misled America about the war in Vietnam and how we were winning and stuff when we weren't. And all this is an outrage, and the people in America start really questioning the war in Vietnam. And a lot of people start saying, I don't want to go. And Kent State, the My Lai Massacre, these things shock America, and it really affects the support. And then you see people in America that are famous. Jane Fonda was a famous actress. She was in Henry Fonda, actor from Nebraska, famous actor. She was an actress herself, and she and a lot of other people came out against the war. She actually went to North Vietnam, and if you look at the middle picture here, there's Henry Fonda's daughter, Jane, with the helmet, talking to North Vietnamese. He also gets a picture taken next to an anti-aircraft gun. But see, this is really tricky because it's wartime. We in America always have a history of supporting our troops, supporting our country during time of war. And when our own people are doing that, it really questions everybody. It shows the opposition war. And it's still controversial today. A lot of Vietnam vets really do have an anger towards Jane Fonda. My friend Larry sure did. Because he didn't understand how he could be fighting in the country, not only not supporting him, but when stars would go to North Vietnam, our enemy. But this war is tearing America apart. By 1970, 71, the American public is just torn. The country of America is torn. And that leads us to what you're going to be doing on Classroom, where you're going to be taking a look at the My Lai Massacre and its effect on the soldiers.